Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Mileham. If we were in school together, we would probably be reading chapter books together. So I thought that I would take a little time each day to read a couple of chapters of one of my favorite books for a read aloud. It's called The Lemonade War. This book is such a fun story, and we're really lucky right now that publishing companies are allowing teachers to share read-alouds with their students while we're not able to go to school. So I hope you like this book as much as I do, and if you happen to be in fifth grade now, if you were in fourth grade last year and you read this book and you're watching this video, please don't give it away. We don't want to spoil the story for the kids that are just now listening. So here we go. The first chapter of The Lemonade War by Jacqueline Davis is called Slump. Evan lay on his back in the dark, throwing the baseball up in a straight line and catching it in his bare hands. Thwop, thwop. The ball made a satisfying sound as it slapped his palm. His legs flopped in a V. His arms stretched up to the ceiling, and the thought that if he missed, he'd probably break his nose made the game just interesting enough to keep going. On the floor above, he heard footsteps, his mother's, and then a long, loud, scraping, groaning sound. He stopped throwing the ball to listen. His mother was dragging something heavy across the kitchen floor, probably the broken air conditioner. A week ago, right at the beginning of the heat wave, the air conditioner in his mother's attic office had broken. The man from Sears had installed a brand new one, but left the old one sitting right in the middle of the kitchen floor. The Treskys had been walking around it all week. Scrape! Evan stood up. His mom was strong, but this was a two-person job. Hopefully she wouldn't ask him why he was hiding in the dark basement, and hopefully Jessie wouldn't be in the kitchen at all. He'd been avoiding her for 2 days now, and it was getting harder by the minute. The house just wasn't that big. Evan had his hand on the railing when the scraping noise stopped. He heard footsteps fading to silence. She'd given up. Probably the heat, he thought. It was the kind of weather, giving up kind of weather. He went back to lying on the floor. Thwap, thwap. Then he heard the basement door open. Pshh. Evan caught the ball and froze. Evan? Jessie's voice sounded echoey in the darkness. Evan, you down there? Evan held his breath. He lay completely still. The only thing that moved was the pins and needles prickling in his finger. He heard the door start to close. Long breath out. But then it stopped and opened again. Footsteps on the carpeted stairs. A black outline of Jessie standing on the bottom step with daylight squirting all around her. Evan didn't move a muscle. Evan, is that you? Jessie took one short step into the basement. Is that? She inched her foot toward him, then kicked him with her bare foot. Hey, watch it, would you? Said Evan, swatting at her leg. He suddenly felt stupid lying there in the dark. I thought you were a sleeping bag, she said. I couldn't see. What are you doing down here? How come the lights are off? It was too hot with the lights on, he said. He talked in a flat voice, trying to sound like the most boring person on the whole planet. If he kept it up, Jessie might just leave him alone. Mom's back in her office, said Jessie, lying down on the couch. Working. She groaned as she said the word. Evan didn't say anything. He went back to throwing the ball. Straight up, straight down. Maybe silence would get Jessie to leave. He was starting to feel words piling up inside him, crowding his lungs, forcing out all the air. It was like having a chest full of bats beating their wings, fighting to get out. She tried to move the air conditioner, but it's too heavy, said Jessie. Evan tightened up his lips. Go away, he thought. Go away before I say something mean. It's going to be hot all week, Jessie continued, in the 90s, all the way up till Labor Day. Thwap, thwap. So, what do you want to do? Jessie asked. Scream, thought Evan. Jessie never got it when you were giving her the big freeze. She just went right on acting as if everything were great. It made it really hard to tell her to bug off without telling her to bug off. Whenever Evan did that, he felt bad. So, what do you want to do? Jessie asked again, nudging him with her foot. It was a direct question. Evan had to answer it or explain why he couldn't, and he couldn't get into that. It was too complicated, too hurtful. Huh? So, what do you want to do? She asked for the third time. Doing it, said Evan. Nah, come on, for real. For real, he said. We could ride our bikes to the 7-Eleven, she said. No money, he said. You just got $10 from Grandma for your birthday. Spend it, said Evan. On what? Stuff, Evan said. Well, Jessie's voice dribbled down to nothing. Evan stopped throwing the ball and looked at her. What? Jessie pulled her legs tight to her chest. Nothing, she said. Right, said Evan. He knew that Jessie had money. She always had money squirreled away in her lockbox, but that didn't mean she was going to share it. Evan went back to throwing the baseball. He felt a tiny flame of anger shoot up and lick his face. Thwap, thwap. We could build a fort in the woods, said Jessie. Too hot. We could play Strategio. Too boring. We could build a track and race marbles. Too stupid. A thin spider web of sweat draped itself over his forehead, spreading into his hair. With every throw, he told himself, it's not her fault. But he could feel his anger growing. He started popping his elbow to put a little more juice on the ball. It was flying a good 4 feet into the air every time. Straight up, straight down. Pop, thwap, pop, thwap. The bats in his chest were going nuts. What is the matter with you? Asked Jessie. You've been so weird the last couple of days. Oh man, here they come. I just don't want to play a dumb game like Strategio, he said. You like Strategio. I only picked that because it's your favorite game. I was being nice in case you hadn't noticed. Look, there are only 6 days left of summer and I'm not going to waste them playing some dumb game. Evan felt his heartbeat speed up. Part of him wanted to stuck a sock in his mouth, and part of him wanted to deck his sister. It's a stupid game, and it's for babies, and I don't want to play a stupid baby game. Pop, thwap, pop, thwap. Why are you being so mean? Evan knew he was being mean, and he hated being mean, especially to her, but he couldn't help it. He was so angry and so humiliated and so full of bats, there was nothing else he could do except alone. And he could be except alone, and she'd taken that away from him. You're the genius, he said. You figure it out. Good. That would shut her up, for once. Evan watched the ball fly in the air. Is this because of the letter? Jessie asked. Crack. Evan had taken his eyes off the ball for 1 second, just 1 second, and the ball came crashing down on his nose. Crud! Oh, crud! He curled over into his side, grabbing his nose with both hands. There was a blinding, blooming pain right behind his eyes that was quickly spreading to the outer edges of his skull. Do you want some ice? He heard Jessie ask in a calm voice. What do you think? He shouted. Yeah? She stood up. No, I don't want any stupid ice. The pain was starting to go away, like a humongous wave that crashes with a lot of noise and spray, but then slowly fizzles away into nothing. Evan rolled to his sitting position and took his hand away from his nose. With his thumb and index finger, he started to pinch the bridge. Was it still in a straight line? Jessie peered at his face in the dim light. You're not bleeding, she said. Yeah, well, it hurts, he said. A lot. It's not broken, she said. You don't know that, he said. You don't know everything, you know. You think you do, but you don't. It's not even swollen. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Evan held his nose with one hand and hit his sister's knee with the other. Then he picked up the baseball and struggled to his feet. Leave me alone. I came down here to get away from you, and you just had to follow. You ruined everything. You ruined my summer, and now you're going to ruin school. I hate you. When he got to the bottom of the steps, he threw the baseball down in disgust. Thud. That's the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2 is called The Breakup. Jessie didn't get it. She just didn't get it. What was Evan's problem? He'd been acting like a weirdo for 2 days now, and it was 2 days ago that the letter had arrived. But why would he be so upset about that letter? This is a puzzle, Jessie told herself, and I'm good at puzzles. But it was a puzzle about feelings, and Jessie knew that feelings were her weakest subject. Jessie sat in the cool darkness of the basement and thought back to Monday, the day the letter had come. Everything had been normal. She and Evan were putting together a lemonade stand in the driveway when the mailman walked up and handed Jessie a bundle of letters. Evan never bothered to look at the mail, but Jessie was always entering contests and expecting to win, so she flipped through the letters right away. Boring, 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 said Jessie as each letter flashed by. Hey, something from school, addressed to Mom. She held up a plain white envelope. What do you think it is? Dunno, said Evan. He was in the garage uncovering the small wooden table they usually used for a stand. It was buried under 2 snow tubes, 2 boogie boards, and the garden hose. Jessie watched while Evan gave a mighty pull and lifted the table up over his head. Wow, he's gotten so big, thought Jessie, remembering what Mom had said about Evan's growth spurt. Sometimes Jessie felt like Evan was growing twice as fast as she was, growing up, growing away. It looks important, said Jessie. It looks like bad news, is what she thought in her head. Was there a problem? A complaint? A mix-up? All the nervousness she'd been feeling about skipping to 4th grade suddenly bubbled up inside of her. This table's really dirty, said Evan. Do you think we can cover it with a lot of cups in the picture and no one will notice? Jessie looked. The table was streaked with black. No. Evan groaned. I'll clean it, said Jessie. Evan had only agreed to have a lemonade stand because it was one of her favorite things to do. The least she could do for him was clean the gunk off the table. Maybe, she said, holding up the envelope again, they're postponing school. Maybe the first day isn't going to be next Tuesday. You think? That got Evan's attention. Let's ask Mom to open it, he said. Up in the humming cool of her office, Mrs. Tresky opened the letter and read it through once. Well, she said, this is a curveball. She looked right at Evan. Jessie thought her face looked worried. Evan, you and Jessie are going to be in the same class this year. You'll both have Mrs. Overton. Jessie felt relief flood her entire body. The same class? If she could have wished for one thing in the whole world, that's what she would have wished for. She would be with Evan, and Evan would make everything easier. He would introduce her to all those 4th graders. He would show them all that she was okay, not some puny 2nd grader who didn't really belong. But Evan didn't look happy. He looked angry. Why? He asked in an almost shouting voice. Mrs. Tresky scanned the letter. Well, the classes were small to start with, and now some of the 4th graders they thought would be attending aren't because they're moving or switching to private schools. So they need to combine the 2 small classes into one bigger class. That is so unfair, said Evan. I wanted Mrs. Scobie, and I don't want... He looked at Jessie. This is so unfair. Jessie was surprised. This was great news. Why didn't Evan see that? They always had fun together at home. Now they could have fun in school, too. It'll be fun, she said to Evan. It will not be fun, said Evan. School isn't fun. And then he stomped downstairs and locked himself in his room for the rest of the afternoon. They never finished the lemonade stand. And there it was, 2 days later, and Evan was still all locked up, even though he wasn't in his room. He wouldn't talk to her, and he wouldn't play with her. So Jessie went up to her room and did what she always did when she was upset or angry or sad or confused. She started reading Charlotte's Web. She had read that book about 100 times. She was at the good part, the happy part. Wilbur had just been named some pig, and he was getting all kinds of attention from the Zuckermans and the whole town. But Jessie couldn't settle into the happy feeling, the one that usually came when Charlotte said, I dare say my trick will work and Wilbur's life can be saved. Instead, she kept noticing an unhappy feeling, tap, tap, tapping on her shoulder. And it wasn't the unhappy feeling that came from knowing that Charlotte was going to die on page 171. It was Evan. She couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. Jessie could only remember one other time that Evan had said, "I hate you," to her. Grandma had been over and Evan needed help with his math homework. He had that frustrated, screwed up mouth look that he sometimes got with math or spelling or writing reports. Mom called it his "he's gonna blow" look. But Grandma couldn't help him because it was all Greek to her, so Jessie had shown him how to do each problem. Well, she'd sort of jumped in and done the problems for him. That was helping, wasn't it? Grandma had called her a girl genius, but Evan had ripped his paper in half and run upstairs shouting, "I hate you," just before slamming his door. That was last year. Jessie rested the book on her stomach and stared at the ceiling. People were confusing. She'd rather do 100 math problems and try to figure out someone else's mixed up feelings any day of the week. That's why she and Evan got along so well. He'd just tell her straight out, "I'm mad at you because you ate the last Rice Krispie treat." And then she would say, "Sorry. Hey, I've got some Starbursts in my room. You want them?" And that would be that. Evan was a straight shooter. Not like the girls at school, the ones who had started that club. She rolled over onto her side to get away from those thoughts. Across the room, against the opposite wall, she noticed the 3 pieces of foam core her mom had bought for Jessie's Labor Day project. Every year, the Rotary Club sponsored a competition for kids to see who could come up with the best display related to the holiday. This was the first year Jessie was old enough to participate. She had begged her mom to buy foam core and gel pens and fluorescent paper and special stickers for her display. She was determined to win the prize money, $100. But she hadn't been able to come up with a single idea that seemed good enough. So there it was, just 5 days before the competition, and the foam core was still completely blank. Jessie reached for her book. She didn't want to think about the girls at school, and she didn't want to think about the competition. She started reading again. Wilbur and Charlotte were at the fair, and Charlotte was beginning to show her age. Jessie read the words that Wilbur said to his best friend. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better." Well, the second part didn't apply at all, but Jessie imagined to herself saying the first line. "I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Evan." It sounded about right. At least it would show him that she cared, and Jessie knew that that was important when someone was feeling upset. She decided to go downstairs and give it a try. She would do just about anything to get Evan back to the way he was before the letter. Jessie looked in the kitchen and the backyard. No Evan. She was halfway down the steps to the basement when she heard a noise come from the garage. She opened the door and felt the full heat of the day on her skin. It was like some giant had blown his hot, stinky breath on her.